the raging sea, just like the veil was torn through Calvary. And we believe in breakthrough, we believe in you. To all our questions there will be an answer, and in all our triumphs you remain. Even in the valley, hope is rising for peace. It has a name, Christ the Lord, who stays the same. Oh, just like the wolves came down at Jericho, just like the army split when worship rose. Oh, we believe in breakthrough, we believe in you. Oh, and just like your voice that calmed the raging sea, just like the veil was torn through Calvary, we believe in breakthrough, we believe in you. For you are alive and you save forever. Oh, you have won the day, and nothing can stand against you, nothing can stand in your way. For you are alive and you save. Oh, and just like the wolves came down at Jericho, just like the army split when worship rose, we believe in breakthrough, we believe in you. Oh, and just like your voice that calmed the raging sea, just like the veil was torn through Calvary, and we believe in breakthrough, we believe in you. Alright, here's what we'll do quickly. Just let's be proactive, let's be on the offensive. Whatever you have, if there's something that's in front of you that's like a big scary Jericho, just stand up and just stick your hands towards heaven. Just reach out to the Father. When you reach out your hands, just picture that you're holding up a banner of truth. You're holding up some aspect of the kingdom of God. Love, joy, peace, healing, health, wholeness, relationship, vision. And if you're not standing up, just stand. Someone standing up beside you, just stick your hand up. All across this room, Jesus, your sons and your daughters, Lord, we stand in agreement together, Lord. One church, oh, one cross. You're the name that's above all names. You're the Alpha, you're the Omega. Oh, you're the beginning and the end. You're the one that holds it all together, Lord. We believe, we release breakthrough. We release breakthrough all across this room, all across this room, Jesus, all across this room, Lord, into every our trials you made. Even in the valley, hope is rising for peace. It has a name. Sing peace, it has a name. Oh yes, peace, it has a name. Christ the Lord, Christ the Lord, who stays the same. Jesus, thank you for your faithfulness, God. Lord, thank you for your love. Thank you for the plan that you have for all of our lives, God. And whatever we have held up tonight, God, you know us better than we know ourselves. Father, you know the things that we look at, and sometimes, God, it is just hard to see your promise over that. But Holy Spirit, I pray that that would be made ever present in our lives. I pray that we would hear and see great testimony and great reports of breakthrough in circumstances and situations that fills faith in all of our lives. God, this is always about your glory, your fame, and your renown. And all the saints say amen. Amen, amen, amen. Guys, sit down for a couple of seconds. Listen, I appreciate it. I'm blasting on here. Let's not worry about looking at the clock, okay? Pastor Aaron's going to come up here in a second, and I just want to share just a little bit of my heart for in the world. We're going to finish with the song "God of This City," and I wrote that when I was on a mission trip in one of the darkest places that I'd ever been to. And basically, it's a place called Pattaya in Thailand, and it's the sex tourist capital of the world. And growing up in Belfast, I had seen like injustice in terms of violence. Okay. Seen bombs and killings and all of that kind of stuff, but I'd never seen people being bought and sold. I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen, there's no less than 30,000 female prostitutes, and that's just the girls from the ages of 18 and above. I'd never seen abuse towards children like this. And when I came home from that, genuinely, my world was utterly transformed, and I mean that. I really, really mean that. And it was like, Lord, whatever. And at that time, there's a big, if we had hours, we could tell you, paint the picture, but at that time, there's a guy from the States who started to sing this song, God of This City. And all of a sudden, doors began to open. And I said to the Lord, whatever platform, whether it's physical or whether it's in relationship, conversation, whatever that looks like, I want to do all that I can to help point people to you, all right, in songs and in stories and whatever, but at the same time, rescue kids, be a voice for kids that don't have a voice all across the world, okay? And I made a commitment to the Lord. I was like, God, I want to be someone that goes. So over the past 10 years, in my small ministry with my family, we've traveled to like Guatemala, South Africa, got smuggled into Burma. I'm not saying that, oh, aren't you so good? It's just, I love adventure. It's in there. Maybe be in some of you. And for some people, that's not part of your makeup, and that's okay. But I love to be someone that travels and goes and sees what God is doing in different parts of the world through the church. And tonight, what we're going to hear about is an organization, is a hope. And hope has a name. Do we believe that hope is the name of Jesus, okay? What we see in countries, and I've seen it firsthand, is genuinely through moments like this, we can change the lives of kids forever. Genuinely. Ezekiel 22:30 says that God looks around for someone that would breach the gap. And I'm a pictures guy, I love getting pictures. But we, in all of our struggles and times when we feel like rich and poor or whatever like that, we are super, super blessed, okay? And there is poverty all across the world that some of us might never know or experience. And there's this gap. And we can be people that bridge that gap and stand in the middle tonight and say, Lord, we want to do something and we want to make a difference in kids' lives. And so Pastor Anne's going to come, show him some love. He's probably one of the most beautiful men I've ever seen in my life right here. And he's going to share just a bit of, and then I'm going to come up and we're going to declare this God of this city. We're going to declare that God has a greater plan for all of our lives in all the cities across the world, in every house, in every home, in every school all across the world. Amen? Amen. Pastor Anne.
Thanks, Aaron. Come on, let's give Aaron a hand for all he's been doing. Have you been blessed so far? Well, I know that it's been an incredible night so far, and it's not over yet, but as he was mentioning, for the next few minutes, we're going to share some things. And on the screen, you'll see a few pictures coming up. And as these pictures start flowing, these are children and orphans that we have helped impact all over the world. Now, if you don't know anything about me, I'm actually a third-generation pastor. My grandfather, right here in Denver, came to the city of Denver in 1969. And then my father has continued that work since 1985. And I grew up in the church and met my wife there. We got married. We've been married almost 12 years, have 3 beautiful children. And in the course of my life in ministry, I actually did worship ministry for about 15 solid years and loved it. And then we did youth pastor and all sorts of great things. But something happened. I went on a missions trip. And when I went on the missions trip, God told me, you're going to start doing this. And I'd never been out of the country. It was to Kenya, Africa. And when I went to Kenya, something changed on the inside of me. Maybe you've had a moment like this with God, where God just changed something. He spoke to you. And I came home, my wife and I talked and said, I don't know anything about this, but we got to start doing some work in the world. So we started going. We had some great mentors like Marilyn Hickey and Reinhard Bunke and all these great people, and they began to teach. And I began doing crusades and speaking to hundreds and then thousands and then even tens of thousands. I remember stadiums full of people that we had and miracles and healings. And it was all good. I mean, we had just amazing things happening all over the world. But there was something happening that every time I was going to an event, I'd be driving on the street and I would look out the window and I would see kids. And these kids would be eating out of a dumpster, or they might be naked. And it just got me, and I'd ask questions like, oh yeah, those are orphans, or that's kids without anybody covering them and taking care of them. And so what began to happen was we were doing one-time moments, and it would be very exciting. And we'd come home and say, wow, wasn't that awesome? Look what God did. But about 3, 4, 5 months later, my heart was still there, saying, what are they doing now? How are those pastors being helped? And God, about 3 years ago, totally changed our efforts and defined them much deeper. And we changed the name of our organization to Expect Hope. And the reason we changed the name was because something on the inside of us couldn't stop looking out the window. As I was traveling personally in a nice car to a nice big stage to speak to a nice big crowd of people, there was hurt happening all along the side of the roads. And I remember one time I literally said, you got to stop the car. And they said, but Pastor, we got this big event. I said, I don't care. Stop the car. I remember we were getting out of the car. This was in the nation of Haiti. And we were in Haiti after the earthquakes. And there's literally bodies, dead bodies. Nobody had even taken them. My heart was just broken. And then I saw this child. I said, who's taking care of this child? Where's the government? Where's the police? They said, there's not enough help here. There's not enough people here to take care of these kids. I said, well, give the child some food so he's not eating out of the dumpster. And then we drove on to the crusade. And I tell you, I was wrecked. And my wife, she started praying, and she said she couldn't be here tonight, by the way. One of my kids was sick. She had to stay home. She sends her love. One of my wife started seeing kids, and she said, we've got to do something to help these children. So we went to the nation of Nepal 3 years ago. And this is the first time I'd done a trip. I've been to over 40 nations of the world in about 10 years, and oh my goodness, God did amazing things. But this trip we went with a different purpose. So this time we're gonna try to help some kids. So we went to an orphanage. There's 17 children, all orphans. And they told me the story. They said these kids, we started as a Christian ministry. We started this orphanage by faith, but we don't have the funds. We don't have any support. The government can't support us, and we're about to close. I said, what do you mean you're going to close? They said, if we close the doors to this orphanage, we're over. I said, well, what happens to the kids? Do you put them in foster homes? They said, we don't have programs like that here. I said, do you do this, do that? I said, we don't have programs like that. I said, what happens to these kids? They say, we try to find them another orphanage, but all the other orphanages in the area have the same problems we do. So if we can't find them a home, we literally put them on the street, give them some food, and say, we'll pray for you. Oh my gosh. I don't know about you. I said, that's not going to happen. I said, so my wife and I have just officially taken care of all these 17 kids. And he said, oh, praise God, Pastor. I said, how much? I guess I should ask that first, but you know. But we did it by faith. And it was so good. And the very same day we went to another stop. We went to another orphanage. The problem I found was this orphanage had 30 kids in the same scenario. And I realized my wife and I can only do so much. Because, as your pastor says, sometimes, pastors, we're not wealthy people. But we do what we can. And so I began to realize real quick that this is a big need. And I began to get overwhelmed. And then we went to another orphanage. There was 3 on that trip. And I said, oh my Lord, I came home absolutely overwhelmed. What are we going to do? And we began to pray. We began to say, how can we respond to what's going on in the world? This is an epidemic. There are orphans literally in the nation of Nepal. This was back in 2015, right after the earthquakes. There's children everywhere with no moms and no dads. They were killed in the the earthquakes. They were separated from, if you remember those earthquakes, they absolutely devastated that nation. And people were killed all over, and children were left homeless all over the nation, running around trying to survive. And as Aaron Boyd mentioned earlier, sex trafficking, human trafficking, just starvation. These are issues that face these children beyond any of our comprehension. But these are the ones because they don't have protection. And something came to our mind and said, this is injustice. But as we begin to pray, God began to reveal in His Word. Many times I had read it before, but it hit me from a different angle, and that's the Rhema Word of God. It comes alive in a new way for where you're at right there in the moment. I begin to understand what a just God is. That these are God's children. And even though they've gone through hardships and they've been robbed of their parents or their families, that God is their Abba Father. And God is a just God. And when we looked at injustice, God said, let my justice overtake their injustice. And I began to say, God, how? Who? He says, you. I said, me. What can I do? God said, I can't touch the whole world. God said, I didn't ask you to touch the whole world. I asked you to touch these kids that I'm placing before you. You know, something happens when we start taking ownership of what God just puts in front of us. Can I hear an amen in this church? When we stop trying to think we have to take the whole world on and start realizing that maybe it's just the neighbor you live next to. Oh my gosh, don't get me preaching. But the thing is, I began to see these kids and I began to realize it isn't about reaching the millions and millions of orphans in the world, although that has become a dream of ours, but it is about reaching the ones that are right there, right within our grasp. These are the children that God has placed before us. And so we didn't even try to, but people started saying, can we help? Can we help? And they began to ask these questions, right? Like, what does it take to take care of a child? And we had to figure these things out. Before we do it, we kind of developed this sponsorship idea and the sponsorship program. And people in our home church really got excited about it. So kind of one by one, these children started getting taken care of. And out of these 40 nations, we began to realize in 4 nations, God had given a specific special favor. And these nations are Albania, Nepal, India, and the Philippines. We have government connections. You know, now I'm a white American, but these Hindu brothers loved me. I don't know why. It's the favor of God. I mean, we work in Albania with Muslims, but yet they like the Christian guy from America. I don't know why. It's the favor. And so we began to see that where others had been stopped, God was allowing open doors. Where others had been told no, God said yes. Why? Because there was an assignment to be accomplished. And when God puts an assignment in front of us, He also opens all the doors that need to get open to get that assignment accomplished. So we began one by one facility at a time, one thing at a time. Then we started building facilities. And this has been a crazy thing. And we just began to share the vision with our church and other people and businesses and churches. And we started raising money. And now we've been building orphanages, and we call them hope houses. Amen. Come on, how many know that's a place of hope? In fact, right now we have, from just 3 years ago, from an idea that God put in our heart, we've seen God bless us. Now we have 11 hope houses in operation in 4 nations of the world. And right now as we speak, number 12 is being built in the Philippines. We went from 17 kids that my wife and I took on to now we have over 360 kids actively rescued and saved and sheltered right now in these hope houses all over the world in these 4 nations. And And by the end of this year, because we're working actively, we have people on the ground, we find children, we connect them to government, we make sure they don't have long-lost family. We do work with the social service programs that do exist. But the thing that makes us a little bit different is we're going after the most extreme in-need children that have no moms, no dads, and no families. And when they say this child has nobody, we say they do now. It's called Jesus. It's called Expect Hope. We're going to put them in a hope house. And God began to give us this radical vision in which we wanted to see a world freed, where children were freed from injustice and given a future full of hope. And something took place when I started looking out the window in the car versus just looking the way I'd always looked. And when you start looking in a new direction, God says, you're thinking it's the drive. I want you to stop the car and do something about this right here. That's the wild thing about our callings and our destinies. And what we've seen taking place is that as these children are being rescued, we place them in a hope house. And what our hope houses do is we provide them with the big five. That's what I call it. We take care of their food, their clothes, their shelter, their medicine or doctor's cares and visits. And most importantly, we give them love. We teach them Jesus. We give them love of like a mom and a dad. We teach them, we have amazing facilities, these 11 facilities. We have country directors in each nation, and then we have facilities in these countries. And it's been an incredible administrative task, but come on, God gives you to do what you're called to do. And all the things I'm not good at, God gave me a bride who can take care of it. Hallelujah. So here's the thing. We have unbelievable needs, as you can imagine. But we've have seen people all over really the country now start saying, I want to help. I want to participate. Because to be honest, right now, out of those 360 children, we have not received a sponsor for every single one of them. I want to tell you a story of one tonight. This is Lester. Lester is from the Philippines. And right now he's living in one of our facilities in a little town. Where's he at? He is in Buena Vista in the Philippines. It's on the island of Mindanao. When I went there the first time and I spoke to the government council, they said, what are you doing here? You're white. That's what they told me. And I didn't say it. I said, I'm sorry. You know, and they said, this is the kidnap zone of the Philippines, man. What are you doing here? Do you have armed guards? I said, no. They're like, well, you got some now. And they gave me all these armed guards. I didn't know to feel excited or scared. And so I just said, yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. So we rolled around. But during our efforts in the Philippines, ever since we began there a couple of years ago, Lester came into our program. See, Lester had a mom and a dad. But they were very poor. They couldn't find work. And Lester's dad said, I've heard about opportunities in another nation called Indonesia. It's close to the Philippines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Indonesia. I'm going to find somewhere. I'm going to start sending money. I'm going to start sending money to support my family. So Lester and his mother said goodbye to Lester's father, and he went off. And for the first few months, he did find a job. He started sending some money, and things seemed to be going better. And Lester said he was so happy, and his mother was happy. But after about 6 months, it slowed down. And before you know it, they just stopped hearing from him. And then some time went by, a few years, they never heard from his father again. He just stopped. He abandoned them. And many times in these countries, you hear of abandonment. It's a major problem. It's a major challenge. It's a major issue. So Lester's mother, being now married without a husband and no way to support herself, became very desperate. Herself couldn't feed him. She was struggling, and she finally found a man, and a man told her, listen, I want to marry you. I'll take care of you, but there's a condition. We start a new life, and Lester's got to stay. She was so desperate and so heartbroken and didn't know what to do, but she figured, well, at least if one of us can live, I guess that's okay. And so she married this man and went to another part of the Philippines. And she would take Lester every day or every few days to a certain spot, and he would play there and while she would go to work and stuff. And she'd always come back and pick him up. But this day, she took Lester to that spot, left him there, and never came back. Lester was abandoned. His mother and father, to our knowledge, still live somewhere. but he was abandoned. And when we found him, when our teams found him, he was eating out of the dumpster. He was half clothed. He was absolutely wretchedly dirty. He was sick. He looked like he was starving to death. And he was scared and angry and all of the above. And this child was just trying to survive. And so we took him to social services. We tried to find his parents. And they began to find a little bit of his story and realized Lester doesn't have anybody. So we brought him into our Hope House in the Philippines. We began to take care of him, and we began to just expend a budget we didn't have. You know, a lot of times when you do stuff for Jesus, you just do it by faith. Can we say amen? And in 1 year's time, we've watched Lester transform. He has family again. He has been learning about the things of Jesus. He's going to school. He's clean. He's healthy. He's eating. I remember the first time I saw Lester, he didn't look so good. And in fact, we give our children something as they communicate back and forth with their sponsors through letters and drawings. And we said, what do you want to be when you grow up, Lester? Lester just had no idea. He was so consumed with survival, he couldn't even think about growing up. He was hoping to live till next week. What was exciting was 1 year later, we went back and gave him the same exercise. And this time, he wrote down that he wanted to be a sports player. He had dreams again. He said, I want to play football or soccer. You know, he says, I want to have a future. And he was dreaming again. And he said, or maybe a teacher. You know, and we said, well, if you're not so good with soccer, you can definitely become a teacher. But Lester's been excelling at school. He's become friends again. He's plugged into his church. He is a life transformed, and he's a perfect example of a child that we believe and hoping to give him a future of a life full of hope. Can we clap our hands and say, amen? And as we do what we do, we have children just like Lester here tonight that because they don't have a mom and a dad, a sponsor, it's almost like a distant relative. Because we take them letters. In fact, I was just in India 2 days ago, and I travel all around the world, and I physically and personally go and visit and see these children. We have a team that do it as well. My wife's one of them. And we are very active and on the ground because everything we do is very, very real. That's the simplest way I can say it. Because every one of these children are real children with real lives and real stories, and we believe God's given us a mandate to take care of them and to help them in their journey. And so tonight we have, I believe, total, there's 19 children right now, 19 tonight. Now that seems like a lot, and it is, but these 19 children we have selected, we're almost through getting every child in our current program sponsored, but these 19 tonight are in the most desperate need, and they're children just like Lester. And so what we do is we provide a program now that's a little more formalized, and it makes it very nice and easy, is that we do a $35 a month donation. And every month that that donation is made, we can ensure that the budgets are being met, food is being provided, the shelter and all the things of the big five we mentioned earlier are being taken care of because of faithful sponsors and partners that I believe, even in this room tonight, can be just like you. There's no way my wife and I can do it by ourselves. We tried. We only got to 17. And we ran out of money real quick. And I mean, isn't that the truth? That it's bigger than any one person. But isn't it powerful when we work together, we can literally change and transform the life of a child? Now, what happens to Lester if he doesn't get a sponsor? I have to be very, very honest. That if the budget and resources aren't there, it does get to the point where if the resources aren't there, you just have to shut the facility down. That is the last thing we want to do, and I got to tell you, in my heart, I just kind of refuse to let that happen. So if I got to talk every day of my life and share the story of Lester until Lester finds a sponsor, I'm going to do everything I can because I know his life is worth it. And I'll tell you tonight, my wife and I have learned something. We've been in public ministry our whole life, and been on a lot of big stages. And a lot of times in ministry, it kind of seems like it's about the minister a little bit. You know, it kind of seems like it's about this audience, this crowd of this church. But one thing that I've learned, that God has actually called my wife and I, her name's Terry, has called us to be the voice to the voiceless. Lester is a child who doesn't have a voice here tonight, but I'm speaking on his behalf. And on behalf of 19 other kids just like him tonight, I want to ask, would you help? Would you be a part of this tonight? Would you consider being a sponsor? Would you sponsor a child like Lester tonight and help us in this orphan epidemic? Give them love. Give them a future full of hope. I tell you, it's amazing what it does. It's amazing how it transforms lives. We love to do what we do. We have a website called expecthope.com. We're very transparent. We put all the financials on there. We like everybody to see. Here's the dollars, here's where it went, here's what it did. But we like to put our impact on it. And let me tell you, since we started this mission, we went from impacting 17 kids to over 360, but let me tell you, the multiplied impact, it's turning into tens of thousands of people. When the storms just hit the Philippines just a few months ago, we're building a brand new Hope House there, and that land, before the building has been there, was the refuge camp. And we had 70,000 people gather around. We did our best. We raised a few $1,000s right here through our network, and we sent it there, and we began to feed 70,000 people right there on the ground of the Hope House. People that lost their homes, they lost their farms, they lost everything. And so even once the orphanage is built, we're going to have a home for 30 new kids starting this year. But what's amazing is that the Hope Houses impact entire communities. And so it's an overflow that takes place. And we're believing also that these children, not only when they come out of the program,